Good morning, everyone. We're welcoming guests in. We're excited to have this conversation today about our LGBTQ plus community and really what the solutions are for our community moving forward. We're going to give this just another couple seconds as people are coming in, and I'm very excited to have this conversation today with these remarkable leaders. Hello, everyone. My name is Angela Hughey. I am the co-founder and president of One Community and One Community Foundation. I am so grateful for those of you that are joining us today for what I think is going to be a very important conversation that is more relevant than ever. Today, we're going to focus on the state of LGBTQ plus folks in Arizona and how we can protect and advance equal protections for us all. We're fortunate to be joined by some of the most prolific community leaders who are leading the way in forging the path forward for an Arizona that celebrates, respects, and protects us all equally. Our panelists will discuss how they approach their work, progress, and challenges in recent years, and how the current political landscape will impact LGBTQ plus Arizonans. But before we get started, let's learn about our panelists and their backgrounds through a round of introductions. Nate, why don't you kick us off?
It's like I knew you were going to call on me. I feel like I'm back in school again. Cleared my voice, ready to speak. Thank you so much, Angela, for having me on today. My name is Nate Rhoton, he, him pronouns. I am the CEO of 1 in 10, where I have been serving with the organization for the last 9 years, 2 months, 7 days. It's been my absolute honor to work for an organization like 1 in 10, serving LGBTQ youth and young adults across Arizona and beyond, ages 11 to 24. Obviously, in particularly the last 8 years, we have seen a real increase in focus on LGBTQ or queer identified young people. And it is why this panel today is so incredibly important to me, but also why it's important for all of us to use our voices to really step up and be allies to our youth community, our queer youth community here in Arizona and beyond at the federal level as well. And that is where One Community plays such an important role in their partnership with us at 1 in 10. I came to 1 in 10 as my first nonprofit career position. Previously, I was in the for-profit space. And while I certainly learned a lot from my for-profit experience, I have found that working in the nonprofit space and leading through passion and dedication to a cause has allowed me to really spread my wings in a way that I never thought possible, to help foster and create change and amplify the voices of young people across this great state. So it's my honor to be here today. Can't wait to share more with you. And should I pass it off, Ange?
Pass it off, Nate.
To the person on my right on my screen, Jess.
I hate following your introductions, Nate. I'm just going to put that out there right now. As I start to introduce myself, I'm like, damn, Nate does such an excellent job. My name is Jessyca Leach. I go by Jess. My pronouns are she, they, and I am the CEO for Prisma Community Care, formerly known as Southwest Center for HIV and AIDS. We just launched our rebrand on January 1st, and we were initially founded in 1990 as Phoenix Body Positive, an agency by and for individuals living with and affected by the HIV epidemic. We morphed through clinical studies in partnership with the McDowell Clinic, helped bring multiple HIV treatments and preventions to the market, and then evolved into a full-service integrated queer healthcare center, offering behavioral health, mental health services, including IOPs for substance abuse disorders, primary care services, gender-affirming care, and we are still the largest private HIV and STI tester in Maricopa County. I would dare to say that we're across the state, but I don't have statistics for that. And I like to actually back up the things I say with data. So we'll probably get into that later. I think in this time and the world we live in, our community is so at risk for basic rights, including healthcare. And so our goal is to ensure that regardless of who you are, you can come to us and get affirming care. It doesn't matter your documentation status. It does not matter your insurance status. We will be here and we will take care of you. And I'm going to throw it to Michael.
Thank you so much, my friend. Oh my gosh, it's so wonderful to be here with you all. Everyone on the call, these are three of the most incredible leaders in the country for the LGBTQ community, and I'm always honored to be in any space that they'll welcome me into. My name is Michael Soto, and I'm the president of Equality Arizona. Equality Arizona was founded in 1992 as the LGBTQ advocacy organization, along with you can see how all of our organizations have been working for a long time and really complementing each other in different roles. In 1992, Equality Arizona was founded as largely a advocacy organization around HIV care for the LGBTQ community, but then quickly moved into advocating to end archaic laws, which were things like sodomy laws were in every state at the time, and was successful in repealing those laws here in Arizona, then moved into marriage equality, and continues to work and advocate for LGBTQ equality throughout the state of Arizona. I have been involved with Equality Arizona since I came out, from intern and college student working with Equality Arizona, to leading Equality Arizona, for today and over the past decade, really. And so I'm happy to be here. I'm excited to do this work with these amazing friends and colleagues, and always ready to have this conversation about how we advance equality for all Arizonans.
Thank you, Michael and Nate and Jess. And I think one of the things that's so important, and I was really reflecting on as you all were really giving not just your personal history and professional history, but your organization's history is just that history, right? Like organizationally, we've all been around for an extended period of time. One Community is the youngest organization on this call, and we just turned 16, which is remarkable. I know I like to say I have not aged a bit, but there's a gray hair or two in there that I'm sure I'm hiding very well right now. And, I mean, I think one of the most important things as we look to move forward and we go into 2025 is really to remember our community's history and how far we have come, and that we are a very resilient community indeed. So let's get us kicked off and really deep into what is going to be a remarkable conversation, I'm sure. So, in recent years, Arizona and our nation have made some tremendous strides in LGBTQ plus rights, right? And I think that's important for us to talk about. What are some of those strides, and how have they affected your organizations? Who wants to start us off? Nate.
Gosh, I clearly sat in the front of the classroom. Um, so, I really love that you start this panel off with this question, Angela, because there is a lot for us to be excited about. And I think given some of the recent headlines and certainly the political arena has made us feel less than positive in some ways, particularly within the LGBTQ community and even more so within the youth space within that community. But there is so much to be excited about. And one of the things that I have often reminded our staff, our board, our the youth that we serve at 1 in 10 is that if you really look at where we are today versus even 10 years ago, but certainly 20 years ago, or for those of us that are knocking on the door of 50, like some, we really remember a day when there was not even a way to be out. So we have to continue to celebrate those advancements while also continuing to push for more. And I think particularly as we look at trans identities, and I believe this is why it's a hyper focus of certain political movements, both for and against, is that we are finally seeing a safety net in some ways. Trust me, I know all of the unsafe areas around trans identities and how hard it is to still come out. So I am not minimizing that in any way, shape, or form. However, when I was in high school in 1992, I didn't know a single LGBT person, LGB, better yet, person in my school in Flagstaff, Arizona. And now when I talk to my niece, who's 15, and she tells me about how many friends she has with all different identities, with different pronoun usage, with how it's a moot point for her and her friends and her school classroom and her teachers, that's a moment to celebrate, because for those young people that are able to live authentically at such a young age, just imagine what it would have been like for all of us if we could have gone through our adolescence in our fully authentic selves. If I could have gone to prom with the boy that I really had a crush on at Flagstaff High School, what would that have looked like for me? Now, I went instead with one of my still best friends, Cheryl, whom I've often talked about over the years because she's just one of my biggest supporters in every which way. And when we went to prom together, she didn't realize I was gay. And later I would break her heart in college. But, what I'm getting at is that it's just so critically important that we see these wins and that we see how we're allowing youth to live authentically and what the long-term impact of that will be. I have a lot to say about the other side and how much we need to increase that safety net. But I think that's one piece as it pertains to youth that I'm incredibly excited about and gives me a lot of hope for the future.
I agree with you, and I'm past that 50 mark, right? And so when I was in high school, you would sign your friend's yearbook, and and everyone would sign it, "Love ya," and then they would write DNQ, and DNQ meant dearly, not queerly.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yes. So we have come a long way. And yes, we have so far to go. But having been around the sun just a little bit, a couple more times than all of you have, I not so fondly remember D and Q. And so that was just there was a constant affirmation that being queer was bad, right? And it was not allowed in any way. Growing up in a rural Ohio town. Jess or Michael, something to add to this conversation about, the strides we have made?
So I do want to give a shout out. I try not to get political because as a C3 healthcare organization, we teeter on that line. But knowing that we have representation that supports us from an allyship, both at the local municipality and then state level, has given me a lot of hope. It was the one ray of light on a day that we will not discuss today. So that I think helps me get through. And to Nate's point about the kids, I look at the youth that come in, and I'm talking anyone who's under 25 at this point is a kid to me, because Nate, I think I'm a year older than you. So I'm real close to that 50 line. But seeing the acceptance and the love, our clinic population identified maybe 1 to 2% as transgender like 4 or 5 years ago. We're up to 10% now, which tells me that people are comfortable actually identifying with who they are and then coming in to get the services they need. So that gives me a lot of hope as well.
I'll echo the representation and visibility. I think that's a huge improvement for all LGBTQ people. Just to be able to see LGBTQ people living authentically, being successful people, living our best lives, forming families, all of those things, pursuing careers. I'll also say, since it's probably my job on this call to talk about politics and policy. So I'll go into a couple of wins that I think have been really remarkable over the last couple of years. There's of course, Obergefell decision in 2015, then the Bostock decision, which essentially made it clear that sex discrimination applies to both sexual orientation and gender identity, specifically in the workplace. Those have been enormous for protections for LGBTQ people across the country. As well as a bill that Angela and I worked on actually really closely with Senator Sinema at the time, the Respect for Marriage Act. That bill in particular, being the first codified federal legislation that protected LGBTQ civil rights during the Biden administration, will likely be very critical in the coming years to LGBTQ families in this country and will ensure that marriage equality exists in this nation no matter what happens in the next 2 years. So that's very important. I'll also say that we have had some defensive wins as well. Again, Angela and I were involved in getting Arizona's version of the Don't Say Gay bill vetoed here in Arizona. And I think we all worked on the repeal of what we not so affectionately called the No Promo Homo law, which was a archaic sex education law from the I think early 90s, that was repealed successfully in this state. And so, not to mention the many municipal ordinances that have been passed in 11 cities in Arizona. And so there's a lot of good happening, even though it can feel like, we take many steps forward, take 5 steps forward, take a couple back. That's how policy works. That's how change works. And overall, I do think that the arc of history is bending towards justice and towards greater equality and fairness for LGBTQ Arizonans and Americans.
Yeah, Michael, I thank you so much for bringing up the actual policy pieces. And to pivot off of what Jess said, right? That grateful for the allyship. We have a broad bipartisan coalition of businesses that have a footprint in the state of Arizona that is, coming close to 4,000 businesses that are in the state that, that stand with our LGBTQ inclusive community. We have a deep faith-based coalition, and when you bring up these wins, whether they're getting municipal ordinances over the line in Mesa and Glendale or Scottsdale or the city of Phoenix, or the Respect for Marriage Act, I think it's really important that people understand that these were all bipartisan wins, and that it is incumbent upon us as an LGBTQ plus community to understand that we need to be bridge builders, and that change and progress is incremental most times, right? And I'm so grateful for the work that we did, in particular on the Respect for Marriage Act, because that really was a defensive play on our end, right? You had a Supreme Court justice in Clarence Thomas that said, I think we need to take a look at Obergefell now that we have toppled Roe v. Wade. Obergefell needs to be taken a look at next, and we were able to cobble together, I think it was 12 U.S. senators that were Republican to sign on to the Respect for Marriage Act, which was a really strong defensive strategy, which ensures that LGBTQ people that are married in the state of Arizona and elsewhere throughout the United States, as long as marriage equality is legal in one state in this nation, we don't lose those 1,138 federal rights and protections. So I think it's always important to educate our community and our allies on the importance of bridge building and finding the things that we can agree on and moving forward on the things we can agree on. We can always come back for more. We're a constantly evolving society. Okay, so these wins have been impactful and important for the LGBTQ plus community here in Arizona and throughout the United States. But let's talk about the current challenges that we see. Michael, since you are our policy expert, do you want to kick us off on the conversation around some of our challenges as we move into 2025?
I would be happy to, my friend. So 2025 is going to be a challenging year. We all know that. And so let's talk about the ways that it'll be a bit challenging. Let's start first with Arizona and our state legislature. So the state legislature, unfortunately, like most state legislatures and assemblies, is getting more extreme, less bipartisan, having the people that are being elected have less interest and less political motivation, honestly, because of the way the primaries work, to work together to come to solutions that work for everyone. And so in Arizona, we're seeing that just like everywhere else. We would love to see Arizona legislators in the 2025 session buck that trend and actually work together on critical issues for Arizona, for LGBTQ people and for all Arizonans. But I think the reality is that we're not going to see a lot of that this year. Just like we've seen less and less increasingly over especially the last 5 years of cooperation, bipartisanship. This coalition of people have put together some of those bipartisan opportunities that have very rarely sprung up at the legislature. But we're going to see division, right? We've already got anti-LGBTQ bills that have been pre-filed, including Senator Kavanaugh's bills that really target transgender students in K through 12 schools. We will likely see sort of a legislating attempt at an athlete ban for transgender students, although we already have a law that does that here in Arizona. So we're going to see, sort of a lot of these same bills that we're seeing across the country, including attempts to redefine sex to exclude transgender people from a definition of sex and gender legally. So it's going to be a bit of a nasty session, right, in terms of LGBTQ rights and politics and representation. We're going to hear a lot of arguments down there. And I think my best advice for LGBTQ Arizonans is to know that we have an amazing governor, and Governor Hobbs, who, like she has done the last 2 years, will hopefully be vetoing any bill that would harm the LGBTQ community that gets to her desk. And so we should be sending our support to the governor, telling her that we want her to continue vetoing those anti-LGBTQ bills, and building relationships with legislators that are both Democrats and Republicans. If Republicans know us better, the hope is that, we know, actually, not just the hope, we know that when people know us as LGBTQ individuals and families, that it's a lot harder to vote against us because we become the representation of LGBTQ people, not a stereotype. So I have a feeling that we will all be working together to send people down to the legislature, to get you meeting with folks, not necessarily about a specific bill, but to build relationships for the long term. On the federal level, the first day of the Trump administration, we expect a flurry, shall we say, of executive orders, including a trans military ban, and likely changes to Medicare and Medicaid, that will further restrict and essentially no longer allow for trans youth and medical care, that is transition related, to be covered by Medicare or Medicaid. There will be many other things that happen. Those are kind of two top of line. There's also yesterday, for the first time in Congress, a national trans athlete ban was introduced into a bill package. And so that's something that we need to be aware of. Arizona is one of the target states where we may be able to help stop that national bill. Mostly because Congress has no need to legislate K through 12 sports, right? That's sort of just a massive overreach of government. And so, no matter what our individual thoughts are on trans people competing in K through 12 sports, we should be able, hopefully, to agree that Congress doesn't need to legislate that. And so there are lots of opportunities for advocacy, most of which are going to be focused on the long term, around actually getting to know and building relationships with Republicans and with Democrats, so that they know us better and can legislate better, in terms of how to govern for LGBTQ fairness and equality.
Jess, that was a lot, right? How does that impact your patients? All of the
Oh,
things Michael just said, right? Like, what are the
yeah.
concerns that you have, really around mental health care, for your patients and for your team as well?
So I have a lot of concerns about that, but I do want to echo something Michael just said. I think it's really easy for us as a community to get divisive with each other as well. It's not just the outside, right? It's inside. So how do we come together as a community and recognize that we might not all feel the same way about something, but we're all working for the greater good? So I just want to put that out there because I see a lot of I'm going to use the word divisive again because otherwise I'm going to curse and it'll be horrible. Divisiveness within different organizations trying to do the same work rather than coming together and linking hands and saying, no, we've got to do this. So putting that out there, mental health. I am so deeply concerned about the mental health of our community, of our kiddos, because while they are a bright, shining star, they are also the group that is getting the largest amount of attacks. And Nate can speak to this way more eloquently than I can, but what we see in our clinic is an uptick in anxiety and depression in our youth that we're treating, as well as in our adults, because the fear of the unknown. From our staff perspective, I'll be real, as a nonprofit, our largest concern right now is funding. So grants, federal grants make up about $3.2 million of our annual budget. And when we have individuals talking about ceasing those operations because they don't believe that HIV leads to AIDS or healthcare shouldn't be accessible for all, we're going to run into problems. I could go on and on and on for hours about all the concerns we have, but what I will also say is we come together, we discuss those things like we are here, and then we sort of plan the attack, right? So that gives me hope. I'm going to add a little sliver of hope at the end.
Nate, what do you want to add?
Both Jess and Michael covered this so well. I want to talk I want to talk less about the legalese or the legislative side of it, but what is the impact on the young people that we serve? And this is demonstrated so clearly as we look at the day after the election, and we saw the Trevor Project youth hotline, which handles suicidal ideations, depression, anxiety, everything that Jess just mentioned, with a 700% increase in calls and text messages. And just let that sink in. 700% increase in one day. Thank God we have something like the Trevor Project hotline. They do great work. Check out their website. There's a lot of great stats and data there. But what also upsets me is that there are real issues facing Arizonans and Americans that our legislative bodies are not focusing on because they're so overly obsessed with preventing a young person from using their pronouns in the classroom and wanting to expose that to a parent, that they're missing the mark on things like our unhoused community. During the holiday break, we had a new data set that came out that showed that the unhoused community had grown by 18% in 2024 versus 2023. It was already an incredibly important issue that we need to focus on as a society, but yet we let it increase by 18%. Where is Congress in dealing with this? Where is our Arizona State Legislature in dealing with this? We also know that in that population of the unhoused community, that 35 to 40% of the youth population, that's 18 to 24, identify as LGBTQ. So this is an LGBTQ issue. Why is that? Well, higher rates of discrimination, higher rates of unemployment, higher rates of depression, anxiety, et cetera. It all is a cycle that if we don't stop, if we don't deal with what is actually happening here on the streets in downtown Phoenix, as well as other metro areas across the country, we're going to continue to see this increase. And my concern is that when we have a large population of unhoused, we see situations like what we saw in downtown Phoenix or in LA or in Portland. And what that does to our young people, it ruins or takes away the American dream. Is that what we want as a society? And the soft impact on our young people can be seen every single day when you talk to them. I really have to applaud Governor Katie Hobbs in inviting our youth during the beginning of the 2023 Arizona State Legislative Session to talk to her directly about what the pronoun bill, one of the first bills sent to her desk in her first session as governor, dealing with pronouns, not water issues, not homelessness, but pronouns in the classroom. That's so critically important that we deal with that. It's not. These young people were so brave in sharing with her what it would do to them. And in fact, one young person, I believe she was 8 years old, trans student from Tucson, said, Governor Hobbs, if this passes, I will be forced to tell every student in my school, including my teachers, how I was born and how that doesn't align with my identity, and I will be in danger. I'm so happy in my school, I'm doing so well, and that will all be taken away. The only person that knows in her school is the principal and the school nurse, and that's for safety reasons, because she is living her best life authentically and in a genuine way. And I was blinking back tears as she was bravely standing up this, so little, talking about this directly from her heart. That's the reality. We're not hurting people by allowing them to go by the pronouns that they identify as. Let's pass on that and let's focus on the important issues and let's make change that's actually going to help Americans and Arizonans.
Absolutely. I'm so grateful for her bravery. And Jess, I want to key in on something that you said where there's like different factions within our community. And I think, from a one community and Equality Arizona standpoint, because we work Michael and I and our organizations work so closely together on so much work from an advocacy standpoint, our belief is that multiple strategies is a good thing, right? And, there are some folks in our community that think that there should only be one strategy. But Michael said something in a meeting we were in right before the holidays that I think really helped an elected official kind of think about things in a different way. And Michael, if you would share that, you were talking about throwing things up against a wall versus demanding.
Yes, yes. So, I think something that we need to get better at as a movement is throwing everything up against the wall like spaghetti, right? And seeing what sticks, and then iterating and changing and getting creative with those things that stick and doing it again, right? Like that's what this work is all about, is really, it's a very creative endeavor, which sounds probably weird to people when you're thinking about the law, but it's all about human beings, right? And it's all about figuring out how, as human beings, we advance the idea that everyone deserves equal treatment under the law. And while that may not sound like a novel concept in 2025, it still is sometimes, right? Depending on the segment of the community that we're talking about. While today we wouldn't think that way in terms of Black folks in this country, right? We generally accept as Americans that it is not a novel idea for Black people to be treated equally under the law. in other communities it is, right? And so and still that can depend, right, on the law, for Black folks or for any marginalized community. So um but excuse me, the civil rights movement made a huge impact, in part because they did throw a lot of things against the wall, saw what stuck, and then got really creative around tactics, strategies, including policy. And so I think that that's a really important part of what our movement doesn't do today. We tend to pick one vehicle, and say that's the only way forward, instead of saying, here's five different options. Let's find groups that can advance each of these, and all of them would move us forward in some significant way. And in fact, that's actually how our opposition works. And in part, why they've been more successful than we have at this time is because they're much more creative in terms of taking multiple strategies and moving it forward. In the work that Angela and I do together, we talk often about how to make change, you have to have inside strategies. So people working with people in power, right? The group, whatever group it is that holds power at that moment, political power. Outside strategies, so people that are in the opposition, right? In the group that is not in power, and then strategies even further out from that, right? So you've got to have multiple lanes of work happening all the time, inside, outside, against all of these different things, inside, outside, all of it. So, um, we need to get more creative in terms of that, I think. And so that's where I think we can run and actually have, for decades, many groups in Arizona have run multiple versions of things like conversion therapy bans or non-discrimination bills, right? And unfortunately, none of those have passed at the state level yet, but it can be helpful to have different versions of a bill running through the legislative process and seeing which one gains traction and then hopefully moves forward. I know one community, I think, had the very first like hearing and educational session ever
Yeah.
at the legislature many, many years ago about non-discrimination, which was huge. And that kind of, I think, for Equality Arizona at the time, that was like, whoa, okay, we need to be working with this group. We need to figure out like what we have missed for the decades that we've been running, or the years that we've been running this bill, right? And then we ran together a nonpartisan or bipartisan bill that got a hearing, a very long hearing at the Capitol a few years
Like a
ago.
5 hour long hearing.
Yes. um, but those things can be really helpful in terms of political strategy. And I know, political strategy isn't just about uniting around an idea. It's about figuring out what different tactics and strategies will actually move that bigger idea forward one piece at a time. And so it can be a little confusing sometimes because I think we all want perfect, right? We all want the best possible outcome. And sometimes the way to get to that outcome is one small piece at a time, right? It's you eat an elephant one scoop at a time, right? And so
Yeah.
that's often how policy works too. And in my career, I have found that it's those unlikely partnerships, often with people you would never think that you would run a bill with, like former Representative Rusty Bowers, who now is a dear friend. And when I met him his first year in office and took a group of trans people that lived in his district to meet with him, he sat down with us, was very polite and cordial, but said, "I will never support anything that you do. I'm totally against everything that would advance, sort of the civil protections for LGBT people." And then his last year in office, he was our sponsor for the statewide non-discrimination bill. So, that's kind of just I think how you do the work, right? You change people's hearts and minds, and you take it one piece at a time and get really creative and do the work, knowing that not one strategy is the answer, but often many strategies get us to where we're trying to go.
Yeah. So well said, Michael. And what I'm hearing from all of you is our stories matter, that knowing us matters, right? And that as we, continue to go into 2025 and beyond, that isolating and going inward is not the answer. We need to continue to be courageous. We need to sit down. I know Michael and I are committed to asking every single elected official for a cup of coffee or non-caffeinated beverage, regardless of the letter behind their name, right? So that they can have the opportunity to get to know us. And while the opportunity does not seem to present itself to move a statewide bill forward in 2025, it doesn't mean it shouldn't be introduced, right? It doesn't mean multiple strategies shouldn't be introduced, and that that really thoughtful one-on-one interaction shouldn't happen, because I think it makes all the difference in the world, and it's just an inch at a time, and then something remarkable happens. If we look back to 2021, when Mesa, Scottsdale, and Glendale all passed LGBTQ inclusive non-discrimination ordinances within a 90-day period of time, what I think a lot of people don't realize is that all of those were 7 years in the making, right? We had been meeting with elected officials and educating them. We had been working within the business community. We had been working within faith communities. And when the opening came upon us, first in Mesa, I guess we were ready, right? Because we had consistently done the work behind the scenes, and all of those meetings added up, and everyone testifying and being courageous added to the opportunity to get Mesa over the line, which then had, of course, a very quick ripple effect with Scottsdale and Glendale. And so I think it's our commitment to continually doing the work, no matter how gusty it is out there, that will help get our community through as we move forward. And, with these non-discrimination policies that have been passed, we've had the support of the business community. Now we're going into an interesting year. We've seen some large corporations pull back on their DEI efforts. But we still believe that there's strong support in the business community, because so many of us work for businesses and are out at work, right? And so the business community seems to care mostly about attraction and retention of top talent. So as we go into 2025, we've seen some pullback from some larger businesses that have been newsworthy. Tractor Supply, Walmart was the most recent that kind of said we're pulling back on our DEI strategies. Do you have concerns? Jess, you're talking about money too, right? And we all have sponsors that are businesses that sponsor our programs and our work and our galas and fundraising efforts. Do you have concerns as we look into 2025 that we'll lose business support for our LGBTQ inclusive organizations? What's your temperature check?
So I think from my perspective, we might lose business support. Realistically speaking, we understand that businesses are going to fall with what's happening at the government level. And I think we'll get other support that will then rush in to fill the gaps. So I'm looking at it from a glass is half full perspective, especially. Angela, I do want to say one thing, though, that affects all of us as social benefit organizations or nonprofits. One of the things that we also have to follow is changes to the tax law that directly impact our ability to raise money from the individual donor and potentially from corporate sponsors, right? Because if we keep making changes like increasing the standard deduction, which decreases the philanthropic efforts because that reward is no longer there, I'm concerned about that happening with corporations. I'm concerned about that continuing in that trend. So it always comes back to funding. I am a recovering accountant, and so I'm definitely looking at that.
Makes sense. Nate, what are your thoughts from a funding standpoint? You 1 in 10 has so many wonderful business supporters and individual donors as well.
Yeah, it is a constant concern. 2024 was a difficult year for a lot of nonprofits, including 1 in 10. Yes, we had some great success with certain events, but overall across the year, we saw a lot of softness from donations, and that is typical in presidential election years. We all saw the data on how much money was spent on these elections on both sides. So it's not a partisan issue. It is just politics in general has become very expensive. So we're recovering from that 2024 deficit right now in 25, and we have a lot of uncertainty ahead of us. We don't know, to Jess's point, whether it's federal funding, whether it's state funding, or individual donors, and she's absolutely right in that incentive to donate as they increase that standard deduction is an issue. I think another thing too, and Angela, you hit on this, is the walking away from DEI efforts. So Michael mentioned marginalized communities and the Civil Rights Act. Well, we're still not at parity. We still see in particularly our young people at 1 in 10, our youth of color, which represent over 45% of the youth that we serve, do not feel safe with law enforcement. There is still so much work to do there. And it really is disheartening to me to see corporations stepping away from that work because they should be leading that charge, because our federal government, certainly in this next 4 years, is not going to be. And there's so much work to do there. With that, I also have to just point out it's inherent upon all of us to use our voices in whatever way we can, sending direct messages through whatever social media platforms you use to those companies. You know, Costco has said they are sticking with their DEI plans, and I have to applaud them in doing that. However, they're now facing backlash from, albeit a small contingency, but we have to, as supporters of that decision, send those messages, say, I am doubling down in my shopping with Costco over some of the alternatives because of your decision to do this. Thank you for seeing the importance in this issue and in the work that you're doing, and applaud them in that. We have to be just as loud, and that's free to do. You don't even have to spend $1 to do that. It's just sending that message, because I'll tell you, they're inundated with the messages saying the opposite. And we have lost, particularly, there was one significant sponsor at 1 in 10, happened 2 years ago. So this isn't new, but 2 years ago, that told us, hey, we're taking a break from this community because of the backlash we've been receiving. And it's been really difficult for our social media teams to hear some of the criticism. And I'm sitting there thinking, your social media teams, I mean, our team is a person of one, and they have to shoulder this every single day. And we work with the FBI and Phoenix Police because of the threats that we receive. That's just the state of reality in working for an LGBTQ nonprofit. And I share that not to scare anyone, but to point out that there's a small contingency on the other side that is very loud. And we have to also use our voices too, and not be afraid to do so.
Well said. Michael, anything you want to add?
I think government funding changing is highly likely to happen. In fact, one of the other equality organizations in this country, in a very red state, already experienced that at the end of last year, where they lost about $1 million that was coming to them from the federal government, that their state legislature decided to no longer give to them at the loss of that $1 million, just because it went to supporting LGBTQ people. And so I think government funding is going to shift a lot. I think corporate funding may shift a fair amount, but I am hoping that corporations see, as we get into this next Trump administration, that Americans do deeply believe in fairness, equality, and liberty for all people, including LGBTQ Americans and all marginalized people, and reinvest in those efforts to support organizations like ours. But I also want to remind folks on this call that our opposition, in large part the people working to erase LGBTQ people from the law, get a lot of their funding from individual donors that donate about 10% of their income to those causes. We could do a whole lot if everyone on this call gave $5 a month to each of our organizations, and then got their friends to do the same. We have the power within our own community to fund the work that we do to a large extent. And I know that can be difficult to give, even a $5 a month contribution, but that contribution is so meaningful to the work that we all do and to the people that our organizations support. So I don't want us to forget how powerful we are as individuals in this community that are LGBTQ people and our allies.
Well, and Michael, to your point, if you look at the LGBTQ inclusive community, so LGBTQ plus and our allies, we're the majority of Arizona. We're the majority of the United States of America. And just from a one community standpoint, I mean, we certainly have some concerns about some of the work that we collaboratively do with our dear friends at Equality Arizona. I have just really said to our team, we are going to be much bolder in our ask. We're going to be more assertive in our ask as well, both with our corporate partners and also with individuals. I understand that tax code has changed, but the need for the work that we all do organizationally has not changed. In fact, it is expanding as we go into 2025. And so I think it's incumbent upon us as a community to understand that we all are have a responsibility to one another, right? And part of that responsibility is investing in the work of organizations that are doing the work to ensure that we are, I think, in 2025 and 2026 in particular, playing really good defense, and having a number of cups of coffee and just meeting people where they're at. So when the opportunity does arise, that we are in a position to take advantage of those opportunities, because the darkness will lift. There will be brighter days and more opportunities to move forward with good policy that protects our LGBTQ plus community. And so for me, and what I've said to our team, it is that we will be bolder when we go into this year, that it is incumbent upon us to be bolder. Uh, you know, I want to make sure that anybody that's ever come across one community can't say, well, you never asked us to give. So just if you're on the call and you are a supporter of one community or you've been to a one community event, just know we'll be reaching out and finding ways for us all to partner as we move forward, because we truly are better together. And it's important that we as a community of Arizonans that believe in equal treatment for everyone support one another in the organizations that we represent and the great work that we're doing. And you know what? I've just decided that we're going to send out an in case you missed it on Friday of all 4 of the sessions. And I'm going to put in a hyperlink for everyone's organization. So folks that are interested in learning more about your organizations and the work that you do, or as Michael said, donating that $5 a month. If you want to make it 10, we're all okay with 10 or more too. We encourage whatever feels right for you, so that folks have the opportunity and can't say that we haven't asked. But I do think that part of our commitment in 2025 is, I said, we're going to ask more often. That's an area that I think, whether we like it or not, and it may make us uncomfortable, we are going to be asking people to participate financially more often. So with that being said, and talking about the opportunity and moving forward, while we don't see an opportunity for a statewide non-discrimination bill to likely get anywhere in the 2025 legislative session, we do have a commitment to reintroduce the Equality and Fairness for All Arizonans Act, because it has had bipartisan support. I think it's also important to say that we listen, that Michael and I and our teams listen. We have conversations with organizations that have different strategies, and there will be a few changes that we think make the bill that will be introduced in 2025 even better, because that's what happens when you listen and you hear people, right? And you meet them where they're at. Are there opportunities to meet folks on some of the pieces that are in this bill? We think there are. And so we're excited to make an update here and there and hopefully garner more support. And we want to reintroduce equality and fairness this year, so that when we're asking for those cups of coffee with every elected official, regardless of the letter behind their name, that there's a piece of legislation that they can look at and we can talk about, because we just think that that's important. So with that being said, Equality and Fairness for All Arizonans has had bipartisan support in the past. We believe it will have bipartisan support in the future, which that we're all working towards. I'm very hopeful 2 years from now, the sun shines again and there's a rainbow that comes with it. But organizationally, you all have been supportive of equality and fairness for all Arizonans. It may not go as far as you would like personally, but you've been supportive. Can we talk about the reasons that you've been supportive about what we think is a really bridge building bill and opportunity to bring fairness to all Arizonans? Jess, you're shaking your head.
I'm always nodding. I'm like, yes, Ange, this is our hope. I think from my perspective, I recognize that change comes incrementally, right? You are not going to get everything you want all at the same time. Hopefully, the majority of us learned that in our youth. Not all of us did. So, from my perspective, something that gets the majority of our community a safety net and gets the support that's going to get it across the line is why we have such huge support for this. I mean, there's a lot of reasons to support this. Limiting or reducing the number of people employed from 15 to 5, that probably includes how many more hundreds of thousands of employers. That protects how many more people. So it's a broad range. And I feel like this is something we could get across, and then we can refine it later if we need to.
Wonderful. Nate?
Building on what Jess said, from the standpoint of our workforce program called career queer at 1 in 10. It's a cohort process that we take you through to help them not only gain the soft skills, but also resume writing, interview skills, et cetera. But in addition to that, knowing their rights in the workplace. And many of our youth will say or share with you that without having the non-discrimination protections here in Arizona, they're choosing other routes, i.e. the gig economy, which is fine. But what are some of the shortfalls to that? Well, they don't have benefits. There's many others and protections that they lose out on by sticking with those types of jobs that if they were able to maybe do that and have full-time employment, then they're working two jobs, they're getting ahead, and they're really making their life better. And at the end of the day, they're becoming even better citizens because they're more productive and our workforce is better, our economy is better in Arizona. So having that protection enables them to see themselves in a workplace because they know that who they are is protected in that space.
Yeah. Michael, anything you want to add?
I think I would just add that, I think equality and fairness for all Arizonans really is a remarkable piece of legislation because it protects the most people, specifically the most vulnerable people in our community today. And that is what it's designed to do in my thought process and in my values process around policy. I think that is the most important thing that policy can do is protect the most vulnerable and marginalized people in a community as quickly as possible with the most rights possible. And that being said, all policy change is incremental. The very first federal equality type bill that was introduced in the late 1970s, today we would not consider that to be a gold standard in terms of protections, right? So even if that bill had passed, we'd still need to be doing work around federal protections today or state protections. And so policy is an ongoing, ever-changing process because human beings are ever-changing and growing. And so this is a remarkable bill that would actually truly change the lives of LGBTQ Arizonans in such a positive way, again, especially the most marginalized. And so that's why I support it. That's why I want to see it move forward. And it also advances the rights of all Arizonans. I love that there are protections for religious minorities, that there are greater protections for people of color like me. That's so important because I really love and taking the all ships rise, right, approach to
Yeah,
policy. If we make the lives of other people better, that creates greater allyship and a greater sense of common good within Arizona, right? And so that's what I want to work for. I love working for our community, but I really love working for communities that I'm not related to, that I have no stake in, and that I will not gain from them having more rights, because for me, that's what it means to be an American.
agreed, agreed. We like to say equality means equality for everyone, not just people we may agree with or may agree with us, right? So that's all I have for our questions, but we do have a couple of questions from people that are on the call, so I'm gonna pop up the Q&A. The first question comes from Diego, and Diego wants to know if there's a focus on intertwining patriotism, given that the right wing uses the American flag a lot, and citizenship to protect civil liberties that unites us all. He says, as an LGBTQ person, I see the opportunity of creating more allies by flying a banner we all share, the American flag. Your thoughts?
I love this. I don't have anything really eloquent to say about it, but I think Diego's absolutely right. The American flag belongs to every single American, and it's not or should not be part of one political ideology. And so I agree with that. I think there's a lot of work we can do with sharing from a community standpoint, our personal relationship with the flag, with being an American. And being an American doesn't have to mean that you're anti-immigrant or you're anti this or that. I think our country was founded under the ideology of we were a place to come to protect people. We've lost that. And how can we come together and find commonality to allow for both sides to be heard and create a pathway forward without it being heavily politicized? But the American flag is a great place to start.
Agreed.
I'll just chime in because I'm a big history nerd, and just a nerd in general, as you all know. Um, I'm, our country, the American Revolution, was was a revolution and was truly incredible in the span of human history, because it was about liberty, right? The idea that human beings had the right to choose their own course in life, to govern themselves, right? And that is still a revolutionary idea. It was very much so in 1776. But that's very much what we're talking about right now. We call it civil rights today or civil liberties, but truly it's just about liberty. It's about the ability to choose your own course in life and to respect the course that your neighbors, friends, and family choose for themselves. That is the most American thing that we can do, and in many ways, the most revolutionary thing that we can do. And I think the first step in that, in celebrating this great citizenship project of America, this great individual liberty project, is to, in 2025, make bridges, build bridges with people that live differently than you, invite them into your life, hope that they will invite you into their life, and get to know people that have different values, that live differently, that think differently, probably that vote differently than you do. That will lead us to a place where this amazing American experiment in individual liberty gets to move forward, and where we get to celebrate liberty, citizenship, and this idea of America as a community, as a country together.
I agree with you, Michael. I have a very diverse family, and we have very different viewpoints. And Sherry and I were at dinner with some of our family members on Saturday who have different viewpoints and voted differently than we did in the presidential election. And we had a conversation about non-discrimination and employment, housing, and public accommodations. And it was fascinating to sit with my family members and realize that they don't know that it is not unlawful to discriminate against LGBTQ people in employment, housing, and public accommodations. And what spoke to me as we got in the car to drive home is that we should never make assumptions that anyone actually understands what it is that we are working towards. And we should also never make assumptions that people already know that we don't have the same rights and protections as our non-LGBTQ plus counterparts, right? And if we choose not to engage, if we all step back, that's when we're really doing ourselves the disservice. That it's really incumbent upon us in 2025 and always to be leaning in and be comfortable being uncomfortable, having conversations where we just meet people where they're at, but also where we educate folks and we're not shaming and blaming folks, but we're giving folks the opportunity, I think, to come into the space that we are in as LGBTQ folks and organizations that represent our community, so that they can better understand. And that's how we turn people into allies, right? Just give them the opportunity and the space and grace to come into that where we're at and to understand our perspectives as well. Jess, anything you want to add?
It's a lot harder to demonize someone that you've met and identify with, right? And so this concept that I can say, this person, I don't like them because this scares me. But wait, I've met someone who represents that identity and they were really awesome. And we share a love of Pokemon or whatever it is. I'm
Yeah.
just throwing it out there. It could be anything. Because I'm also a giant nerd, Michael. So I think there's that, but I also think there's a sense in America of the rights of the individual over the needs of the community. And how we bridge that gap is something that I'm constantly looking at because individually, we want these rights. We want to know that we're safe and protected. And people oftentimes infer that rights for others are a direct danger to the rights of themselves. And so recognizing that equal rights for everyone builds the community up and lifts everyone up versus attacks someone and their fears and concerns. So that's not an answer to any of these questions. It's just something that I've been contemplating.
It's good to contemplate. We will keep noodling on that one together. Uh, all right, let me see. How do we continue? Oh, come back. How do we continue to build our community and strengthen the intergenerational sharing? And this will be our last question because we're approaching the 11 o'clock point. But how do we continue to build our community and strengthen the intergenerational sharing?
I can jump in on this one. I think we kind of referenced it a little bit. It's being open with who you are, with different generations, right? It's really easy for me to come out to a 25-year-old or a 20-year-old because there's a general acceptance versus coming out to my 75-year-old mom who thinks the word is biosexual and not bisexual. So yes, there's a whole moment there. So it's having that space to be your authentic self, trusting the other person to accept you, and then recognizing, well, that might not always happen. What do you do to keep yourself safe after that might not go well?
Makes sense.
I think I would just encourage everyone to get to know elders in our community. We have people who were a part of leading the charge nationally and in Arizona, who are alive and still doing that work and being amazing human beings right here all across Arizona. So go learn from those people. I know that I would not be the leader I am today or the human being I am today without the mentorship of so many people who founded the organizations we all work for today and the ones that came before our organizations and all of that. So get to know elders. I, at the beginning of December, was fortunate enough to be able to listen to a panel of LGBTQ leaders from across the country. Including the first out transgender city councilwoman in Minnesota, and the first facilitator of ACT UP. And that was such a blessing to be able to listen to their insights, reflections, and learn from their leadership, especially in this time. So get to know your elders, and get to know everyone. Go out and approach people that live differently than you, that are a different age than you, and get to learn from their perspective. That'll make us all better at what we do.
Yeah. Nate, anything you want to add?
I'll just give a quick plug to one of my favorite events that we do, which is our National Coming Out Day storytelling series. And it's for all of these reasons. And we invite community members to just share their coming out stories. It's on October 11th every year. It's one of our newer and smaller events. It'll be on Saturday in 2025, and we hope to make it a really family-friendly daytime event and invite representatives from all of these organizations to share in this event and tell stories as well. But several years ago, we had Miss Millie, and I use her name because she is an author and she is very much an out and proud advocate of the trans community, but sharing her story of being a Black nurse, trans female Black nurse in the 50s in the South Side of Chicago. And you could have heard a pin drop in that room. And for our youth that were attending that event to hear about this, to understand that, look at what she did and what she faced. And what I'm facing is not nearly like that, but yet there are still some similarities. And what can we learn from one another? And then we also have young people share their stories too. And just like our elders, our youth share powerful stories of what they have gone through. Even though their lived experience may be several decades less than some of us, it doesn't mean that they don't have something really powerful to share and to listen to and learn from.
Well, it seems like we're all going on a listening tour for 2025. I want to thank you all. I'm so fortunate to walk alongside each and every one of you, and our community is in your very, very capable hands. Thank you for spending time with us today and for all you do.
Thank you, Angela.
Thank you so much, Angela.